Hey guys, Fawn here. Today we're talking all about the berries. They are one of the slowest food resource in Age of Mythology, with gather rates up to 20% as slow as hunt. However, they have a few advantages. They spawn very close to the town center area. On average, you get about 8 of them, each providing 150 food. That's 1200 consistent food, which unlike hunt and herdables doesn't rot. And in certain situations, they're not just equivalent, but I would say even better than hunt or herdables. Once you have run out of your safe hunt and herdables, they can be a great secondary food resource. This is great in classical age because you want to delay your farming time as much as possible because you want to use that wood and gold towards building your army or expanding your economy. When you're expanding to a new TC, a lot of times you would find extra patches of berries nearby. I really like these because once I put 4 or 5 villagers on these berries, those that built the TC, I am sure in my mind that for the next 5 to 6 minutes, I wouldn't have to worry about adding extra food resource to keep the TC production going. And anything after this can go towards doing any other thing that I want, whether it's making army, getting some technologies, or even going up to the next stage. So with these in mind, let's look at how the data looks for each god and also look into some key takeaways about how to use berries as a resource in a game. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritties of statistics for berries, let's look into a bit of background. Berries are usually small, pulpy, edible fruit. In a culinary sense, we think strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, etc. However, botanical definition would also include things like grapes, tomatoes, eggplants, bananas, and chili peppers. And funnily enough, watermelons and pumpkins are some kind of giant berries that fall into the category pepos. Historically speaking, they've always been a complementary secondary food resource, and that seems to match the theme that we have in Age of Empire games, where berries are usually the secondary food resource which you go to after you have finished with your hunt. And again, historically, this has been since mythological times, so to speak, where it was important and remains still important food resource amongst other primates. As much as 5,000 years ago, Egyptian fruit basket contained napak fruit or napak berries as a standard. And maybe that is why they are uniquely strong now in collection of berries in Age of Mythology. In ancient Greece, there was mulberries, blackberries, and even ancient Norse in the Viking era, they had bilberries and raspberries that they used as a food resource when they went raiding. And to signify these, we also see many bonuses in game for all of these civilizations, all of these gods. Now, you might look at this and say, Fallen, this is completely wrong. Husbandry should never be here. And kind of maybe also divine blood doesn't belong here. However, I would say yes, in general, that's not a direct bonus to a collection rate for berries. It does change the fact that you make fewer trips to your granary and it saves seconds, so when you add it all up, you get a slight increase in the collection rate. Also, personally, I would say I much prefer technologies that give the same 10% increase in collection rate and age earlier. So, Scared Cats for me would be a 4-star out of 5 technology, as opposed to Winter Harvest from Skadi, which comes a bit later. You already have 50-60 villagers. Now, remember, berries that you can gather are very limited. So just Scared Cats is a lot more valuable because that's when you're kind of about to move to your berries. You've run out of herdables, you've run out of safe hunt, and it's far more useful. Alright, so Age of Mythology is very asymmetrical in terms of villagers, just functionality of each pantheon. So how we're going to do this is we'll first look at pantheon-wide data, see which gods, which technologies are available and how they affect the berry gather rate. And then later on, we'll try to combine at the end in some sort of a summary on which pantheon does the best. Of course, it's Ra, but which pantheon is doing second best, or what other useful, interesting statistics are there. And we'll try to look at how many villagers you have to put in collection of berries so that you can sustain continuous queue on your town center. The Greeks in general are perceived as the most efficient, most population efficient civilization that is out there. And we see that in the data that they have the highest per pop collection rate, which is 0.8 per second. However, they don't get a lot of economic bonuses that add on to this collection rate. And when you look at the data, you see that they don't ever cross that threshold where you can have just 4 villagers on berries, and that would be enough to keep a constant TC production. It's not like the Greeks are doing very well in the mid game, so maybe there's an opportunity here just to give them a little bit of boost. Okay, next we have the Atlantean Pantheon, and this is where things start getting a bit more difficult because they have 2 kinds of villagers. There's a regular citizen, and then there are hero citizens who have a boosted collection rate. And then there is an upgrade which only applies to the hero citizens. There are 3 key things to note here. First, husbandry doesn't give you any bonus because they drop off everything immediately. There is no travel time, so that benefit never comes in. If you are aging up with Prometheus, you have to keep in mind that Theft of Fire only applies to heroes, so it doesn't matter if you do the upgrade and you have 20 normal citizens, it does nothing. And finally, you have to keep in mind that in a normal game you will have a mix and match of these 2 units, so it'll take some time to get a feel for how many citizen plus hero citizen you should put on any resource. Now, looking at the data, there's nothing standing out here. It's just very slow collection rate, and you have to make sure that you have at least 3 citizens per TC, and the only time this will change is when you have 2 Atlantean citizens along with Theft of Fire on berries. So now getting to the Norse pantheon, things are now starting to ramp up in complexity and decision making because there's just so much going on. You have gatherers, which are the main food collection units for Norse. There are also dwarves who are good at mining, bad at food and wood collection. But then there is Thor, and Thor has a specific bonus that buffs food collection rate by dwarves, and then they come back up to the top as being very good at it. So it goes back and forth. So let's look at the data and see how it ends up. So first, looking at the gatherers, you can see that they're doing quite okay, almost comparable to the Greek villager. However, their collection rate is slightly slow, and that means that husbandry actually makes more difference in the collection rate. So you get 1.7% increase in collection rate, and then if you age up with Skadi in the 3rd age, you get 10% buff plus a bit of bonus from husbandry, so you would have somewhere around 11% increase in food collection. Alright, so the first thing I notice here is dwarves, even though they are considered so bad at food collection, are still doing better than Atlantean citizen, and that's just crazy to me. Of course that is per pop, but still, they are still higher than Atlantean citizen. Next is husbandry, and clearly the slower the collection rate is, we can see a correlation that husbandry will have a bigger impact on the food collection rate from there. And then you have winter harvest, which of course increases flat 10%, and that's working as intended. And then we come to Thor, who of course gets more incentivized to use dwarves because they aren't just almost equivalent to gatherers in terms of other resources. He also gets some free dwarves as he does more upgrades at the armory. So at base level, a Thor dwarf is about 3% slower than a gatherer, John Rick gatherer, and that's already great. For a Thor dwarf plus husbandry, you have to note that the percentages here are rounded up, and The Thor initially had 13.6%, and with husbandry that goes to 14.4. Of course, after rounding, it has come up to about the same percent. And after winter harvest, with Skadi, of course, a Thor dwarf has overtaken a generic gatherer and is actually just about the same ballpark as a generic Greek villager. In general, the rule of thumb here is again to keep 5 villagers on berries to keep constant town center production. Now getting to the Egyptian pantheon, we are looking at a lot of data, so I'll split them into a few slides. First, let's look at set and how the base level performance is for laborers. As expected, they start off a bit slower than both Norse gatherers and Greek villagers. However, it's not very slow, and once you start factoring in that pharaohs can buff them, the pharaohs are doing some kind of magic where the gatherers or the laborers are collecting the same amount of resources, but when they try to put it at granary, magically there is 20% extra food every time. And then if you have technologies like Book of Thoth, they increase the collection rate, so it shortens the collection time, and that's how it increases the collection rate. And if you combine them both, you don't just get increased collection rate, but in that time you are also getting increased food from pharaoh, and that results in an extraordinarily high food collection per minute. Key thing to remember is your pharaoh should be empowering the second food drops. It doesn't matter what he does in between. Next is Isis, and she has a leg up above Set because she has 2 technologies that benefit the food collection rate, apart from, of course, Pharaoh boosting the food drop off. So she has Sacred Cats and she has Book of Thoth, and both increase 10% the collection rate. And as you can see, the increased food from Pharaoh plus the increase in food collection rate, they don't quite add up. They are increasing. The increase rate is being affected more by having a pharaoh there. So instead of 20 plus 10, 30%, you're getting 34% increase in collection rate. And with the pharaoh, we are already reaching a point where just 4 villagers are enough to keep the villager production. As expected, Ra with his 25% increased berry gather rate is the MVP here. And if you're able to use his other bonus, which is pharaohs can empower monument to give an AoE empowerment at 70% the power, or priests can also empower buildings at 70% pharaohs ability, which would mean the food collection rate at that point, just generic, no technologies needed, is higher than most food collection rates for any other civilization. And I don't just mean berries, it includes hunt and herdables, period. But of course the bonuses don't end here. If you're using a pharaoh, so full capacity pharaoh empowerment, and then you get 20% increase, which leads you to 63 food collected per minute when they are on berries. If you are in the second age and you have sacred cats, then you are again higher than most other civilizations in the second age of Ra. If you're using empowerment plus sacred cats, then you could reach as high as 69 food per minute, and this is enough to just use 3 villagers to queue per TC. And this is crazy, because this is 100% more efficient than Atlantean citizens who need 3 full citizens to keep up villager queue in a single town center. Next, if you look at Isis and see the collection rates for berries and hunt, with pharaoh empowered granary, of course the difference is not that high, and of course with hunt the food decay, so you're collecting less food. So I would say berries are still preferred in second age as long as you've grabbed sacred cats technology. Lastly, I wanted to look at dwarves, specifically Thor dwarves, because they are put as being very similar to gatherers, and in my test I found that yes, they have about the same collection rates as gatherers, and actually they are preferred if you're going to hunt smaller animals with 100-150 food, and if you're going to use dwarves, it's better to just put them on berries, because I found the target change actually reduces their gather rate to lower than what it would be for berries. To sum it up, I would say that berries are somewhat underrated in Age of Mythology Retold, and in some cases, for example for Ra, it just makes sense to go for berries first instead of hunt, because the boost in food is just higher. And I would recommend people to test out more, at least going to berries instead of an unsafe hunt, as long as you can empower the granary, again with relative safety of your town center as opposed to out in the open. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you have any further ideas of what I should try to analyze next, please leave a comment down below. Thank you, and see you next time.